everybody. My name is Liz Smith, and I'm the Associate Professor of Ceramics at the University of Central Arkansas. I'm also the Associate Chair of the Art Department at UCA, and I'm really pleased that you guys are all willing to be here to help me with this project that I could never get done without the help of a large group of people. We are working on, you guys and myself and others, are working on an art project that's going to be a small sort of component of a much larger suffrage centennial celebration at UCA. The Associate Dean, Dr. Gail Seymour of the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences has had this big vision to create a centennial celebration of suffrage, the women's right to vote, which obviously centennial happened 100 years ago. And I was invited to sort of think about something that I could do in the arts for this project, and I started thinking about suffrage, and I started thinking about how great it was that women, got the right to vote, but then we also had discussions about how not all women got the right to vote, and not all men still had the right to vote. And I started thinking about how, in some cases, while it certainly has improved, exponentially over the past 100 years, there's still a part of our population that doesn't have equal access to voting. And that kind of disenfranchisement creates problems when our desire is to create a representative government, right? In the United States of America, we want to have a representative government, which means a government that represents the voices of all of the people in our country, not just some, but all. And so as I was thinking about that, I started thinking about, what kind of visual metaphor might work to sort of explain or show the beauty of what a diverse United States might look like. And I started thinking about the American flag, and I started thinking about how do we represent diversity and use the flag and talk about voting and the importance of voting and the lasting effects of voting. And so this is what I came up with. I have, because I teach ceramics, it came, it's starting from a point of clay. And so I knew that clay came naturally occurring in a beautiful array of different colors that really kind of mimic the skin tones of a diverse sort of range of folks in our country. And so I have a couple examples here of, I've got from the darkest clay body that I could find. You can sort of see the color of it here. It's really beautiful. To some things that are more kind of in the middle, to here we've got a sort of a grayish white, and then we've got this one that's a little more red, and I have others. I just don't happen to have all of them here at my home studio, and since we're in the midst of a pandemic, I just brought some of the clay home and left a lot of it in the studio. I should say we have about 2,000 pounds of clay, and the hope is that we will make at least 8,000 acorns. And I chose the acorn because for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that it's going to be kind of easy to build, and I needed something where folks, like perhaps some of you who've never worked in clay, could have success in making sort of maybe your first piece out of clay. I also chose the acorn. I was thinking it needed to be some kind of seed pod that had an easy form to build, and I was thinking seed pod because obviously I think the seed represents the start of a thing that could become strong and lasting. So an acorn, which is a seed, the acorn grows into sort of the powerful and strong oak tree that lasts over many lifetimes. And in the same way, representative government policies are made by elected officials that can last and have very strong effect over lifetimes. And so to me, the acorn became sort of a symbol of the beginning, but also of a powerful future. And so that's why we decided on the acorn. And so what we'll do is we'll make all of these acorns with a really diverse group of people, which is exciting because we're hoping to have conversation about voting rights and voting access as we're sort of making these. I was at the same time when I sort of conjured the project thinking of women and thinking of quilting bees and how women in a community would get together, and sometimes still do get together to sew a quilt for someone. So it's a sort of a gift to others where a lot of labor is involved, but also around that table where the labor is happening, there would often be conversations about sort of the news of the day or the news of the community. And so the quilting bee was sort of in my mind, and I thought it would be so great if we could all get together and make these acorns and at the same time have conversation about voting access and ideas about the importance of voting and all the kind of topics that sort of surround and infiltrate that discussion. So that was kind of where all the ideas for the project sort of came from in my mind. And of course, we need about 8,000 of them, and I can't make 8,000 all by myself. And so I'm really appreciating that you guys are all willing to be here to sort of help me make these. So I'm gonna just sort of get to it, and I'm gonna show you how to make it. I'm gonna take this clay body because I feel like you can sort of see. This one is so dark that I was afraid it might not work effectively on a demo. But I'll make one of those also. I also down here have a couple that have already been fired. And so what we're going to do once the acorns have been fired is during the centennial celebration, we are going to lay all these acorns out, all this sort of beautiful diversity of acorns, and we're going to kind of mix and match them in sort of general tones to make an American flag. And so the American flag will be made of individual acorns made by individual people with individual needs and life experiences and desires for what our government will be. And those will all be laid out, so the American flag will be sort of a flesh-toned flag that hopefully represents this idea of, you know, to be a representative government in the United States of America, we need to have the full range of diversity that our country sort of encompasses. And so that's where these will end up. And you will all, of course, be invited to the celebration to come and see the piece when it is on site. So, how to make an acorn. It's a pinch pot. It's pretty easy. Some of you have probably done it before. Maybe if you ever worked in clay, you probably made a pinch pot. So right now I'm just going to pound this ball of clay. It's about the size of a clementine. I'm going to pound it into a ball, and then I'm going to divide it maybe 2/3 and 1/3, something like that. And then I'm going to pound it back into a ball, each of those little shapes. So there's one, a little smaller than a clementine. This one, about the size of a ping pong ball, golf ball maybe, something, apricot. Anyway, so then we'll take the bigger piece and we're gonna just pinch it. I'm gonna move this bag in place so I don't knock it off my table. Okay, bigger piece of clay, and we're going to just hold it in the palm of the hand, and I'm gonna find the center of that ball with my thumb, and I'm just gonna start pushing down into it a little at a time. So you can kind of see that I'm just doing a little at a time. And while I'm doing that, I'm trying to think about keeping it curved inwards like that. And I'm going to do that with the 3 fingers that I have on the outside, sort of pushing in and around, if you can kind of see that. I'm not pinching flat, I'm pinching kind of around the thumb on the inside. And that's going to keep it in sort of a rounded shape. You're getting some glare from my window behind me. We're not going to let COVID-19 stop us from making this great project and celebrating this really important event in our history. We're not going to do it. So here I am going. I've got my acorn body. So what's going to be important here with the acorn body is after I've got it shaped, you can kind of see that it's still curved in, but it's got a nice big hollow space in it. I'm trying to keep the walls sort of as even as I can. They're about the thickness of my pinky finger. And here I'm gonna, with my two thumbs on the inside, I'm sort of supporting the clay up at the top. I'm gonna make a little tip for my acorn. Okay, so then this is the body. And I'm going to then put this on the table upside down. If I put it on the side, it'll squash my nice round acorn. So I'm gonna put it here upside down. I'm gonna take this other smaller piece of clay and do the same thing. Start with a pinch pot. Make a lot of beautiful things starting with this really simple process. And as I start flaring it out, this one's going to flare out more than this one because this is going to be its little acorn lid. I'm going to use both of my hands, and again I'm sort of pushing it around my thumb and getting it sort of even and thin. Again, I'm gonna put a little stem in my acorn lid. So I'm sort of pinching around, feeling it, make sure it's sort of nice and even. And then I'm going to make sure that my acorn lid sort of fits onto my acorn body, and if it doesn't, I'm going to just flare it out a little bit more. If you get a little bit of cracking, that's really not a big deal. You don't have to sweat it. So it's going to be like that. But this is not finished. These will fall apart. They won't stay together. So we're going to do something called scoring and slipping. So I'm going to take this tool, and I'll provide you with forks that you can use. And I'm going to score in the top edge of this acorn. And I'm going pretty deep. Maybe 1/8 of an inch. This doesn't have to be neat. In fact, you want it to be kind of messy. Just right on the top of the lid. That's scoring. So again, I'm going to put this down so I don't flatten it. I'm going to take my lid. I'm going to do the same thing. Scoring. Now what this is going to do is, instead of the clay sort of sitting on itself like this for the two pieces, which won't hold it together, it's going to kind of blend those two, the lid and the acorn body, together like this. So it's going to be a much stronger bond. So when we fire it in the kiln, they won't fall apart. So that's my scoring. And then I'm going to put a very small bit of water, just kind of tapping it on there, in those scored grooves. You don't want the water dripping down the side of the piece if you can help it, because that will just make a slimy mess. And then I'm going to do a little bit on this one too. Probably holding both of them in your hand at once was not a good idea. Probably I should have scored the lid first. Then I'm going to take them. You can see this is pretty soft, so I'm holding this sort of with gentle fingers. If any of you have ever picked up a baby bird where you want to sort of hold it but you don't want to squeeze it, I'm holding it like that. And so then I'm going to put my lid and my acorn body together, and I'm going to kind of gently press it. And you can press fairly hard because now you've got an enclosed airspace, so it's sort of like a balloon. So it's not going to, it's going to resist being crushed a little bit. And you want to make sure that your lid is pretty firmly attached to your body, so it's not going to fall off when we fire it. Another thing you want to do is, once you've got them together, you can put some texture in the top, and you can see I've made a couple here and put different textures. So this one's has sort of a stripy texture. This one's polka dotted. This one a young student made that's sort of textureless on the top, which is fine. This is one that I just built. And so I'm going to take this, I'm going to put some texture on it. You can kind of see what I'm doing here, just to sort of apply some acorn-like texture. And this is just to sort of make it your own, make it your individual. When you're making these, I do want you to not worry too much. Like, I'm not looking for perfect acorns. I'm looking for acorns that each person's hand is going to make something that's different. You know, you guys are individuals. Your acorns are going to look like you. Maybe they're super neat and tight, and maybe they're sort of wacky and loose, and that's great. All those things are excellent. We're going to welcome all that different sort of aesthetic diversity in the acorns. We actually want it as part of the project. So I'm going to keep going here until I finish it up and get all these polka dots or divots, little acorn divot textures in the piece. You know, and there's no perfect acorn, right? Some acorns are long, they're all different kinds. Some are long, some are flatter, some are rounder. So, you know, just embrace the variety of your acorn. So then the last thing I'm going to do is, once I'm finished here, I'm going to take this tool, it's called a needle tool, and I'm going to poke it up in between the acorn lid and body, someplace where you can't really see it, you know, where it's not going to be really obvious. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a little hole where, as this acorn dries and shrinks, the air can escape out. Because if we didn't do that, it's sort of like a balloon, and the air inside won't shrink as the clay itself is shrinking, and it can crack the piece. And now also, if any of you guys have taken ceramics, you've heard the dreaded, like, it will explode in the kiln. And so this hole, it shouldn't explode in the kiln, but this hole is going to make sure that it won't explode in the kiln, because all that air that's being heated up inside and possibly creating steam will be able to escape out of this tiny little hole, and then we won't have any exploding problems. So that's how you make an acorn. And whether you're taking part in this virtually, or maybe you've done one live, socially distanced on campus, that's how we're going to make them. And if you are interested in making more acorns, you can make them in your spare time, you can make them with your friends, socially distanced. You can contact me. My email address is liz@uca.edu, and our plan is to have the artwork installed around mid-October. We don't have a set date, but we're feeling like it's very important that this project get done before voting day arrives. Make sure you've all registered. And thanks for taking part in this really fun and sort of important project. And I hope you guys can all be involved in the suffrage centennial celebrations at UCA. Keep your eyes peeled for those announcements and be there. It's going to be a great event. Thanks so much for coming. Bye-bye.